radio station, and we're now going to talk about polyamory, which basically means having more than one romantic partner at any time with the consent of those other partners. This follows last year's release of a book by Rosie Wilby called Is Monogamy Dead? And we've also got a Canadian study which shows that apparently 4/5 of respondents said they were or had been in a polyamorous relationship. That 4/5 figure sounds absolutely astonishing. The people who identified as polyamorous were more likely to be women educated to postgraduate level. Joining me now is the comedian and activist Kate Smurthwaite, whose new comedy show is all about polyamory and open relationships. Good morning, Kate.
Morning, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks for joining me. I'm just going to dive in straight away. So are you polyamorous, Kate, then?
Yes, I am indeed, yes.
Isn't it rather exhausting? You have to keep a quite careful diary, don't you?
Well, yes, it's interesting. One of people's most common questions is like, how do you manage to, isn't it just a lot of organising? And the answer is yes, thank goodness for Google Calendars. It absolutely is the case. But I mean, the same is true if you have lots of friends. You have to keep tabs on who you're seeing and when you're seeing. And it's important sometimes if you have a friend who you've perhaps not seen for a little while to drop them a line and stay in touch. And I mean, the same goes for a lover if you haven't spoken to them for a while, and it's particularly if you think that they might be feeling left out or lonely, it's important to drop them a line, yeah.
So what's the attraction of this lifestyle for you?
I think for me, when I heard about it, the first time I heard about it, I was at a conference. I was asked to introduce one of the other speakers at the conference, and there was a little biog that I'd been sent, and it said that this woman, was an expert on X, Y, and Z, and this, that, and the other, and she lived on a farm on the south coast in a polyamorous relationship. And immediately, my brain sort of did the maths and figured out what that meant. And I remember just actually being filled with a sort of jealousy, with a sort of like, how does she get that? Why can't I have that? That sounds amazing. I want to live like that. And it took me several years before it sort of the second thought crossed my brain, which was, oh, well, I can. Like, if other people can do this, then there's actually no reason why I can't. It's simply a question of, looking for people who also want to do that and setting out on that path kind of thing.
So obviously you tell your partners what's going on, but do they also, I can imagine perhaps you might have a partner that says, I understand what you say, Kate, that's fine, you lead your lifestyle, but actually I'm really probably just going to have you in my life and that'll be enough for me. Do you get that kind of scenario? Not necessarily you, but other polyamorous people.
Yes, actually, I have a very good friend, a couple, and they're, she sees other people and he doesn't. I mean, he kind of has permission to, if he wants to, but he has chosen that he doesn't really want to at the moment, but it might change in the future. And I think I can never imagine, for me, going to a situation where I was like, you're not allowed to see anybody else, and I would never do that thing of like, promise me you'll never look at anybody else ever again. But I can absolutely foresee a situation in which I'm in a relationship and I'm kind of focused on it for whatever reason, and at that point I don't want to see anybody else, and so I might effectively kind of live monogamously just because that was how I felt like behaving at the time. But it's certainly not how I feel at the moment, and it's certainly not the way that I live at the moment.
You mentioned jealousy a couple of minutes ago. Do you ever feel jealous of your partners, other partners, that whoever is off that weekend in Brighton with so-and-so? Do you ever sort of think, oh, gosh, they're going to be having a really good time, and I might lose this partner because he or she falls in love with someone else?
That's a really interesting question, and it's the one that comes up all the time. And there's a sort of four-part answer to it. And the first part is like, do I ever feel jealousy? Yes, I feel jealousy all the time. I'm bringing my show to London, and I am absolutely jealous of less talented comedians who get put in bigger venues and sell more tickets. We're all jealous. When somebody at work gets a promotion you thought you deserved. We all absolutely feel jealous, but it doesn't mean you have to quit your job and burn the building down. You can kind of go, oh, what am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm angry that I wanted that and somebody else has got it. Okay, and then you can move on from that feeling and learn from it or whatever. Secondly, a lot of the time with relationships, what we're actually feeling, I think, is envy, which is not, I want to go to Brighton with Simon instead of this person. They're like, that sounds like a great thing to do. I want to do that as well. And actually, if you're the second one to go to Brighton with Simon, he'll already know his way round, and he'll already have a suggestion of a great B&B you can stay in and a lovely dinner, restaurant you can have dinner in. So actually, quite a lot of the time, what you're thinking is actually, I want to do that too, not I want to be there instead of that person. The third step is that actually a lot of the time, no, I don't feel jealousy. Actually, what I feel is what I think of as the opposite of jealousy, which we sometimes call compersion, which is this great word that means when you're happy for your partner, if they have a good time, if things are going well for them. And it's actually, I don't know, I feel when I see other people do that for me, I feel an absolute sort of groundswell of affection for them. So New Year's Eve this year just gone, I went to a party with a guy that I'm dating, and let's call him Simon, because Simon's going well, isn't he? So I was at this party with Simon, and at the party I got off with somebody else that I met at the party who I thought was cute, and let's call him Fred. And at the end of the day, Fred was leaving the party, and I looked round, and Simon jumped up, and he dashed across the room, and he grabbed Fred, and he said, Fred, don't leave without Kate's number. And he gave Fred my number. Wow. And I just think, wow, isn't that brilliant? Don't we love Simon? Because he's looking out for my best interests. He wants me to be happy, and in a completely unselfish way, he's like, you seem to be having fun with Fred. Let me make sure that Fred gives you a call and that he's got your number.
That's astonishingly generous.
Yeah, and that's lovely. And then in terms of, aren't you worried somebody's going to leave you? It's interesting because in a monogamous relationship, if you see somebody who seems attractive, you're immediately faced with that choice. Do I stick with what I've got, or do I go and see somebody or leave it all behind and go off to this new thing which seems super exotic and exciting, and I'm not allowed to sort of test the waters at all, whereas in a polyamorous world, you can go on some dates with this person, and you know what happens when you go on a few dates with somebody. You realise that they have 16 habits that annoy you to the absolute high heavens.
Yes.
And you don't have to leave me if you find somebody else you find attractive. You can see them too. In fact, I might get on with them. We could all hang out. It's a different way of operating, and for me, it feels a lot like I'm considerably less at risk of being left. And if I am left, I've got other partners I can turn to at that point. And, of course, you can't replace an individual because in the same way you couldn't replace a friendship. Nobody else is quite that person to you. But there are parts of a friendship or a relationship which you can replace.
Kate?
You can go, I always like doing this with somebody. I know who'll be great to do that with. And you can fill some of that gap. And I've found the breakups that I have had since I've been fully poly have been much less traumatic than
Kate,
breakups that I did have back in the old monogamy days.
We're running out of time, Kate, and I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us about your comedy show. What are you doing, and where are you doing it? Just quickly.
Yes, so I'm doing the show in Brick Lane at Juju's on the 19th of April, and I'm actually doing it again the 1st of May in Sydenham at the Poodle Club. It's called ForniKATEress, and it's the true story of one woman and her 10 boyfriends. And what it really is, I answer the 8 questions that people always ask me when I tell them that that's how I live. The sort of ranging from people wanting to know, is it all about group sex, through to my mother just wanting to know, why on earth is this necessary? And yeah,
so
and
all the questions
are all on my website.
Are all the questions I've asked so far in the 8 questions in your comedy routine? Then?
No, you found a few new ones.
Oh,
but I do
excellent.
tend to hang around afterwards for anyone who's got something pressing that they haven't thought of. Yeah,
actually, there's one more I would like to ask. You sort of mentioned it. You mentioned your mother. What is the general reaction of family to this, and older people as well? Do they disapprove?
Well, that's you always think that's going to happen, and of course, some people, older and younger, disapprove. But interestingly, the generation that precedes me, grew up in the '60s in the era of free love, and in actual fact, I find it's very common that I talk about this with people who are over 60, and they say, "Oh yes, that we do that. Yeah, we don't call it that, and we have a different word for it." But actually, I think our generation thinks we invented, sex and relationships, and the truth is, not really, actually.
I think, yes, it's interesting, the generations. In the 60s, as you were saying, it was free love. I grew up in the 80s where it was serial monogamy, and now perhaps we're moving into this polyamory phase again. But Kate, thanks very much for joining us. Really good to speak to you. Stay with us here on Love Sport. In just a minute, we'll be finding out what London is talking about.